Let's start with the first lesson, the best Christmas present in the world. So, the best Christmas present in the world is a story by Morpurgo. In this story, the author buys a roll top table from a junk shop and to restore it, starts working on it on Christmas Eve. While repairing it, finds a secret space in the last drawer. In that secret space was a small tin box, and he finds a letter inside that tin box written by Jim Macpherson, a captain of English Army, to his wife Connie. And it was a narration of an incident that took place on the battlefield in 1914 on Christmas Day. On that day, the German and English soldiers were celebrating Christmas together, forgetting the rivalry between them and also that they were at war. They shared wine and food. Also, they played a football match and sang carols at night. The author took his letter to Mrs. Macpherson to the hospital and gave her the best Christmas present in the world. So, let's begin the lesson. First part, I spotted it in a junk shop in Bridgeport, a roll top desk. The man said it was early 19th century and oak. I had wanted one, but they were far too expensive. This one was in a bad condition, the roll top in several pieces, one leg clumsily mended, scorch marks all down one side. It was going for very little money. I thought I could restore it. It would be a risk, a challenge, but I had to have it. I paid the man and brought it back to my workroom at the back of the garage. I began work on it on Christmas Eve. Here the story begins with the authors buying a cheap roll top table from a junk shop, and though it was in a bad condition, the author thought that he would restore it on Christmas Eve. He started to repair it, and the table was of the 19th century, was made of oak. The drawer here was badly damaged. The whole top is badly damaged, but he had to do for that. I paid the man and brought it back to my workroom at the back of the garage, and began work on it on Christmas Eve. I removed the roll top completely and pulled out the drawer. The veneer had lifted. Veneer is the thin layer of plastic or decorative wood on the furniture of the cheap wood. Had lifted almost everywhere. It looked like water damage to me. Both fire and water had clearly taken their toll on this desk. The last drawer was stuck fast. I tried all I could to ease it out gently. In the end, I used brute force. I struck it sharply with the side of my fist, and the drawer flew open to reveal a shallow space underneath. A secret drawer. A secret drawer means that is the secret one to keep the thing secretly. There was something in there. But there was something in that secret drawer. I reached in and took out a small piece tin box. So, when the author pulled out the last drawer, he found a secret space there. In that secret space was a small tin box. On top of that box, it was written Jim's last. See here, sellotape to the top of it was a piece of lined note paper, and was written on it in a shaky handwriting, Jim's last letter received January 25, 1915, and to be buried with me when time comes. I knew as I did it that it was wrong of me to open the box, but curiosity got the better of my scruples. It usually does, and that is feeling that makes you hesitate to do something wrong, the feeling that comes when we are doing something wrong. So on top of that box it was written Jim's last letter received January 25, 1915, and that is to be buried with me when the time comes, inside the tin box of an envelope with the address written on it. That is for inside the box there was an envelope. The address reads Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12 Copper Beach, Bridport, Dorset. I took out the letter and unfolded it. It was written in pencil and dated at the top December 26, 1914. And that is written there with the address on the envelope that written on it, Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12 Copper Beaches, Bridport. The date on the envelope was December 26, 1914. Now, second part. Dearest Connie, I write to you in a much happier frame of mind because something wonderful has just happened that I must tell you about at once. We were all standing to in our trenches yesterday morning. Standing to is taking a position. Christmas morning. It was crisp and quite all about as beautiful a morning as I have ever seen, as cold and frosty as a Christmas morning should be. So the author began to read the letter, and it was written by Jim Macpherson, a captain of the English army, to his wife Connie. What he narrated? He had narrated a beautiful incident that took place on the battlefield on Christmas Day. It was Christmas Day, and the English and Germans were at war. So that is a beautiful morning. I should like to be able to tell you that we began it, but the truth, I'm ashamed to say it that Fritz began it. Fritz mean here a name of the German soldier. That is the German name. First, someone saw a white flag waving from the trenches opposite. Then they were calling out to us from across no man's land, "Happy Christmas, Tommy! Happy Christmas!" When we had got over surprise, some of us shouted back, "Same to you, Fritz! Same to you!" I thought that would be that. We all did. But then suddenly one of them was up there in his great coat and waving a white flag. "Don't shoot, lads!" someone shouted, and no one did. Then there was another Fritz up on the parapet, and another. Keep your heads down. I told the men it's a trick, but it wasn't. So it was Christmas Day, and the English and Germans were at war, and both the armies were in respective trenches. And all of a sudden, he saw someone waving a white flag from the German side, and he heard German soldiers wishing them Merry Christmas. And some of the English soldiers also wished them the same. Surprisingly, what they saw a German soldier moving towards them, which alarmed Captain Macpherson, and he thought it would be a trick. But the German soldiers brought they are just keep your heads down. They told it's a trick, but it wasn't. One of the German was waving a bottle above his head. "It's a Christmas Day, Tommy. We have schnapps." Here is pronounced that is a drink, German drink made from grain, which have sausage. "We meet you." Yes, by this time there were dozens of them walking towards us across no man's land, and not a rifle between them. Little Private Morris was the first stop. "Come on, boys, what are we waiting for?" And then there was no stopping them. I was the officer, and I should have stopped them there and then, I suppose, but the truth is that it never even occurred to me I should. All along their line and ours, I could see men walking slowly towards one another, grey coats, khaki coats meeting in the middle, and I was one of them, and I was part of this, and in the middle of the war we were making peace. So the soldiers were hugging and wishing each other. Jan Wolf, the German officer, shook hands with Macpherson. Wolf told them that here they all are just they can't stop themselves to greet. So what we are waiting for, they said, and there was no stopping, and that was all. That was end of the matter, maybe the end of that war, and I was one of them, and I was part of this. In the middle of the war we were making peace. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feeling as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer who approached me, hand outstretched. "Hans Wolf, he said, gripping my hand warmly and holding it. I am from Dusseldorf and I play the cello in the orchestra. Happy Christmas. What he said here, by shaking hand, the soldiers were hugging, and by I am from, he was from Dusseldorf, and the play and he played cello in an orchestra. Captain Jim Macpherson, I replied, and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. Ah, Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum ration and his excellent sausage, and we talked. Connie, how we talked? He spoke almost perfect English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, even never even been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there is no man's land. We talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak, the Sergeant Troy, and Dorset. He had a wife and one son born just 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating, handfuls, and then I shared that what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Connie. He thought that marzipan was the best he had even ever tasted. I agreed. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. So here, everyone is enjoying here. Macpherson told them that he was from Dorset and was a school teacher. Han Wolves told him that he is a New English, and Thomas Hardy in his favorite writer. And in his book Far from Madding Crowd, he had described Dorset. Thus, he knew a lot about Dorset from there. And Macpherson offered him a cake sent by his wife Connie. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Great coats were dumped in piles to make goalpost, and the next thing we knew, it was a Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Hans Wolves and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim Macpherson, he said, after a while, I think this is how we would resolve this war. A football match, no one dies in a football match, no children are orphaned, no wives became widow. So the soldiers played football together. After the match, all of them enjoyed food, drinks. After all, they parted back to their trenches, and they enjoyed, because that was a moment which noticed our breaths mingling in the air. Their breaths mingled in the air, and they smiled. Jim Macpherson, he said, for a while, I think this is how we resolve the war. And the football match, no one dies in a football match, and no children are being orphaned, and no wives became widow. So I would prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game. Sad to say, Connie, Fritz won 2 goals to 1, but as Hans Wolves generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. So here the time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the scraps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped it would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So here the war will end soon. Maybe the war is over, so we will go back to homes. We will meet our families. That is the wish of all the khaki and all the soldiers. So they are that the fighting would end and we could go home again. I think that is what every soldier want on both sides. Hans Wolf asked, "Take care, Jim Macpherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you." He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. I felt he turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey coated men drifted back towards their trenches. Now, after all, they parted back to their trenches. After the match, all of them enjoyed the food and drinks and they get back to their trenches unwillingly. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was still a Natch, silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of while Shepherd watched. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fall silent. All fell silent. We had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So later at night, both the armies sang carols for a while and then there was silence. He wrote that these memories are a treasure for this lifetime and hope that the war will end soon. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. Terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon. I am sure of it. Your loving Jim. So, after reading the letter, the author decided to return. Um, Means this is the memories and the treasure, and he hoped for a lifetime and he hoped that the war will end soon and we will. This is the terrible and distant memory for us. So here third part, I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into its envelope. I kept awake all night. By morning I knew what I had to do. I drove into Brightport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burnt-out shell, the roof gaping, the windows boarded up. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew where the whereabouts of Mrs. Macpherson. "Oh, yes," said the old man in his slippers. He knew her well. A lovely old lady. He told me a bit muddle headed, but at her age, she was entitled to be, wasn't she? 101 years old. She had been in the house when it caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in the nursing home now. He told me, Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. So here, uh, after reading the letter, author decided to return the letter to Mrs. Macpherson and he went to her house in the Brightport, Dorset and found that it was already burned. Mrs. Macpherson, 101 years old, was inside the house all the time of the fire, and the author comes to know that the Mrs. Macpherson is in the nursing home now, and he finds her um, mm, because the fire all over the house and the person which already catches her quite in a good condition. And I found Burlington House nursing home nearly easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway and lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with a lopsided angel on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson to bring her a Christmas present. I could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. She even offered me a mince pie, and she walked me along the corridor. Mrs. Macpherson is not in with the others, she told me. She's rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. She has no family, you know, and no one visits, so I'm sure she will be only too pleased to see you. She took me into a conservatory with a wicker chair and potted plants all around and left me. So, after reading the letter, the author decided to return that to a Macpherson, and he went to that address in the nursing home, and he finds her sitting on a chair there. And when he called her Connie and returned the letter to her, what he finds, she took me to that the person to that conservatory with the wicker chair and potted plant all around and left me. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap, and she had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun, and she was gazing out at the garden. "Hello," I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. "Happy Christmas, Connie," I went on. "I found this. I think it's yours." As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with the sudden glow of happiness. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. Now here he finds her sitting on a chair there, and when he called her Connie and returned the letter to her, her eyes is lit up, and she took his hand with eyes filled with tears and said, and what he said here, see, but I don't think she was listening. For a while she said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. She is just seeing the letter with his tenderly with the fingertips. Suddenly she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest," she said, "and here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim. Dear, sit down." I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. "I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me. And now you are. Now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I would love that so much, and then perhaps we will have some tea. I have made you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan." And here he finds sitting on a chair, and what he do when he called her Connie and returned the letter to her, her eyes lit up, and she took his hand with eyes filled with tears and said that her Jim kept the promise. Also, she made the author sit beside her and talk lovingly for long with him. She said that it is the best Christmas present in the world. She's taking him as a Jim, and she also that we will have some tea after that, and we will I have made a nice Christmas cake and marzipan for you. How much you like, I know that. And the conclusion of the best Christmas present in the world is, the story states that war brings only destruction and sadness in the world. Only the path of peace will lead us to the happiness and welfare of mankind. So, this is the story, a nice story. I hope you guys understand the story. If you are having any doubt, let me know by comment. Thank you.